The old train was colder than I expected, and the windows were fogged from the damp night air. I remember sitting there with my bag on my lap, holding it the way a child holds a pillow, tight, close, like it could keep me safe. The station behind us was fading into the dark, swallowed by shadows and winter mist. I had no reason to look back. Everything that mattered to me was either gone or too far away to touch anymore. I told myself I was leaving for a fresh start, but the truth was, I was running away. And when the train conductor walked down the aisle, tapping each seat with his little flashlight, his voice calm and steady, he stopped right beside me. His eyes settled on me for a moment longer than they should have, and then he said the line I still think about today. "We may not arrive tonight." Just like that. Soft, matter of fact, almost like a warning, but not quite a threat. I didn't understand what he meant. I didn't realize how deeply those words would stay with me, how they would become a symbol, not of the journey, but of my life at that moment. Looking back, maybe he saw something in my face. Maybe he saw someone who wasn't sure where she belonged anymore, someone who didn't want to reach the destination too quickly. Because when you're broken inside, arrival isn't comforting. Movement is. I remember nodding, like I understood him, but I didn't. I just stared out the window and let the night swallow my reflection. The lights flickered overhead and the engine rumbled beneath my feet. The train was old, the kind that tells stories with every shake and shiver. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck, trying to feel warm, trying to feel something. People around me were quiet, some sleepy, some lost in their own problems. A mother holding her child close. A man reading a newspaper even though the lights kept dimming. 2 teenagers whispering secrets they'd probably forget by morning. And me, sitting there with my thoughts louder than the train itself. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. If anyone had looked at me right then, they might have thought I was peaceful. But inside, my heart was racing. Life had been heavy for too long. Too many disappointments, too many words said and unsaid, too many memories that refused to stay quiet. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and whispered to myself, maybe tonight will change something. Not because I believed it, but because I needed to hear it. I didn't know where this train would lead me in the end. I didn't know if the journey would be short or long. I didn't even know if I would feel different when it stopped. All I knew was that I wasn't the same person who had walked into that station. Something had already shifted. And when the conductor's voice echoed again, announcing the departure, I felt the first pull of the train, slow and heavy, like a tired heartbeat. The wheels turned. The night swallowed us. And I whispered goodbye to everything I couldn't fix. The train had been moving for a while, though I couldn't tell how long. Time felt strange that night, stretched thin like a thread pulled too tight. Every second felt heavier than usual. The rhythm of the wheels started to steady my breathing. That soft clattering sound, almost like a lullaby, helped me settle into my seat. I didn't have many belongings with me, just one travel bag filled with a few clothes, a book I had read too many times, and a folded piece of paper I couldn't bring myself to open again. It held words that hurt me more than any wound, but I kept it anyway. I kept everything, even what broke me. I didn't know when I started believing that I deserved that kind of pain. Maybe it began years ago in tiny, unnoticed moments. A small comment, a forgotten birthday, a promise broken quietly. One disappointment after another until the heart yearns to shrink, until the person learns to stop expecting warmth. I shifted slightly, trying to get comfortable. The train's lights flickered again, as if to remind us that this journey wasn't meant to be easy. I glanced around. Everyone seemed to have settled into their own worlds, their faces soft in the dim light, their thoughts hidden behind tired eyes. I wondered what they were running from. Or maybe they were just going home. Everyone has a different reason for traveling. My reason was simple. I couldn't stay where I was anymore. I tried. I really had. I tried staying quiet. I tried being stronger. I tried believing people when they said things would get better. I tried holding on to a life that kept slipping away piece by piece, like holding sand in my hands. But the truth is, sometimes life needs to push you out so you can learn how to walk again. And that's what happened to me. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to. I looked down at my fingers, noticing how they trembled slightly. A gentle, almost invisible shake, not from cold, from exhaustion, the kind that sits deep inside the bones. Outside the window, the darkness was thick. Only a few scattered lights from small houses passed by like tiny stars on the ground. I imagined people sleeping peacefully inside, unaware of the train rumbling past, unaware of the strangers carrying their burdens through the night, unaware of the stories being told silently in this moving metal room. Sometimes I wished I could be one of them, someone with a soft bed, a warm blanket, and a life that didn't feel so uncertain. But wishing never changed anything. I learned that the hard way. The conductor walked by again, his footsteps slow, measured. He checked the doors, then the aisle, and then he paused by the window near me. He seemed to be listening to something, a distant sound, maybe the engine, maybe the wind outside. His brow tightened just for a second. When he turned around, his eyes met mine. Not by accident. It felt intentional, like he knew I was awake, like he knew I couldn't sleep even if I tried. "You all right?" he asked softly. It was such a simple question, a kind one, but it hit me harder than I expected. "Yes," I whispered, though it wasn't true. He nodded gently, not pressing, not questioning, just accepting the lie like it was the only truth I could handle. "I'll be around if you need anything," he said before walking away. That sentence stayed with me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't extraordinary, but it had kindness in it, and I hadn't felt kindness in a long time. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to breathe, to let the air settle in my chest. The hum of the train wrapped around me like a thin blanket. My mind drifted, not to the future, but to the past, to the life I left behind. It wasn't a loud departure. There were no screaming arguments, no slammed doors, no dramatic scenes, just silence. A silence that had been growing for years, the kind that slowly pushes two people apart until they stand on opposite sides of a life they once shared. I remembered the last evening at home, the way the house felt too big, too empty, the echo of my steps, the quiet that felt like judgment. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold long before I realized it. I didn't drink it. I didn't even sit down. I just stood there, thinking about how strange it was that a home could feel like a stranger. I remembered how I packed. Slowly, hesitantly, picking things not because I needed them, but because they reminded me of better days. A scarf my mother gave me, a small wooden box with a broken hinge, a photograph tucked between pages of a book. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. There was no one to tell. Life had become that quiet. When I walked out of the door, I didn't lock it behind me. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me hoped someone would notice the open door and ask where I had gone, but no one did. I reached the station early, too early, and sat on a metal bench watching the minutes pass. People rushed, people waited, people hugged each other goodbye. I sat alone, invisible in a place full of movement. Sometimes loneliness isn't about being alone, it's about feeling unseen. The announcer's voice called the train number. I picked up my bag and boarded, not knowing where I would end up, just knowing I needed to move. That was enough. The train carried me into the night, and I let it. Back in the present, I opened my eyes. A faint reflection stared back at me from the window. My face looked tired, a little older than I remembered, a little sadder, but something else too, something I couldn't name. Maybe courage, maybe resignation, maybe both. The train slowed slightly as we passed through a small town. The lights of the station flickered by, illuminating the worn benches and empty platforms. No one got on. No one got off. Just a brief pause before darkness swallowed us again. A woman sitting 2 rows ahead shifted in her seat, rocking a sleeping child in her arms, her movements careful and protective. There was warmth there, something soft and comforting. It reminded me of a feeling I once knew. I wondered what her story was, what brought her here, what she was hoping to find on the other side of this journey. Everyone on this train had a reason to travel. Everyone had a destination. Everyone had a past. And somewhere between all those reasons, I found myself wondering something simple. When did my life become so small? It's not an easy question. It's not one you ask when things are going well. It creeps in slowly, showing up in quiet moments, like sitting on a cold train in the middle of the night, afraid of both arrival and delay. The conductor's voice came through the speakers again, soft and slightly crackling. Next stop will be a short halt. Stay in your seats. His tone was calm, but carried a seriousness I couldn't ignore. The train slowed, the wheels screeching just a little. We came to a stop at a place so small I couldn't even see a sign. The doors didn't open. I felt the tension in the air grow, almost invisible but definitely there. People shifted. People looked around. People waited. The conductor walked in again, checking something near the entrance, talking quietly to another staff member. Their faces carried concern, not panic, but something thoughtful, something aware, something like caution. I watched them for a moment and looked down at my hands again. My life had been filled with moments like this, stops, pauses, hesitations, times when things didn't go wrong but didn't go right either, moments that make me feel suspended between choices, between futures, between versions of myself. The train started again, slowly at first, then faster, as if it struggled to find its rhythm. I listened to the sound of the engine, the rattle of the wheels, the sighs of tired passengers. Everything blended into a single hum, and I realized something quiet, something honest. This journey wasn't just about leaving a place. It was about understanding why I couldn't stay there anymore, why I couldn't stay silent, why I couldn't keep fighting for something that stopped fighting for me. Somewhere on that dark track, in the silence between stations, I felt the first flicker of acceptance. Not peace, not yet, but acceptance. Maybe the train wouldn't arrive tonight. Maybe it would. But I wasn't the same person who boarded it, and that mattered. I rested my head against the glass again and breathed deeply, letting the rhythm of the rail steady the heaviness inside me. When he turned around, his eyes met mine. Not by accident. It felt intentional, like he knew I was awake, like he knew I couldn't sleep even if I tried. "You all right?" he asked softly. It was such a simple question, a kind one, but it hit me harder than I expected. "Yes," I whispered, though it wasn't true. He nodded gently, not pressing, not questioning, just accepting the lie like it was the only truth I could handle. "I'll be around if you need anything," he said before walking away. That sentence stayed with me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't extraordinary, but it had kindness in it, and I hadn't felt kindness in a long time. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to breathe, to let the air settle in my chest. The hum of the train wrapped around me like a thin blanket. My mind drifted, not to the future, but to the past, to the life I left behind. It wasn't a loud departure. There were no screaming arguments, no slammed doors, no dramatic scenes, just silence. A silence that had been growing for years, the kind that slowly pushes two people apart until they stand on opposite sides of a life they once shared. I remembered the last evening at home, the way the house felt too big, too empty, the echo of my steps, the quiet that felt like judgment. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold long before I realized it. I didn't drink it. I didn't even sit down. I just stood there, thinking about how strange it was that a home could feel like a stranger. I remembered how I packed, slowly, hesitantly, picking things not because I needed them, but because they reminded me of better days. A scarf my mother gave me, a small wooden box with a broken hinge, a photograph tucked between pages of a book. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. There was no one to tell. Life had become that quiet. When I walked out of the door, I didn't lock it behind me. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me hoped someone would notice the open door and ask where I had gone, but no one did. I reached the station early, too early, and sat on a metal bench watching the minutes pass. People rushed, people waited, people hugged each other goodbye. I sat alone, invisible in a place full of movement. Sometimes loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about feeling unseen. The announcer's voice called the train number. I picked up my bag and boarded, not knowing where I would end up, just knowing I needed to move. That was enough. The train carried me into the night, and I let it. Back in the present, I opened my eyes. A faint reflection stared back at me from the window. My face looked tired, a little older than I remembered, a little sadder, but something else too. Something I couldn't name. Maybe courage, maybe resignation, maybe both. The train slowed slightly as we passed through a small town. The lights of the station flickered by, illuminating the worn benches and empty platforms. No one got on. No one got off. Just a brief pause before darkness swallowed us again. A woman sitting 2 rows ahead shifted in her seat, rocking a sleeping child in her arms, her movements careful and protective. There was warmth there, something soft and comforting. It reminded me of a feeling I once knew. I wondered what her story was, what brought her here, what she was hoping to find on the other side of this journey. Everyone on this train had a reason to travel. Everyone had a destination. Everyone had a past. And somewhere between all those reasons, I found myself wondering something simple. When did my life become so small? It's not an easy question. It's not one you ask when things are going well. It creeps in slowly, showing up in quiet moments, like sitting on a cold train in the middle of the night, afraid of both arrival and delay. The conductor's voice came through the speakers again, soft and slightly crackling. Next stop will be a short halt. Stay in your seats. His tone was calm, but carried a seriousness I couldn't ignore. The train slowed, the wheels screeching just a little. We came to a stop at a place so small I couldn't even see a sign. The doors didn't open. I felt the tension in the air grow, almost invisible but definitely there. People shifted. People looked around. People waited. The conductor walked in again, checking something near the entrance, talking quietly to another staff member. Their faces carried concern, not panic, but something thoughtful, something aware, something like caution. I watched them for a moment and looked down at my hands again. My life had been filled with moments like this, stops, pauses, hesitations, times when things didn't go wrong but didn't go right either, moments that make me feel suspended between choices, between futures, between versions of myself. The train started again, slowly at first, then faster, as if it struggled to find its rhythm. I listened to the sound of the engine, the rattle of the wheels, the sighs of tired passengers. Everything blended into a single hum, and I realized something quiet, something honest. This journey wasn't just about leaving a place. It was about understanding why I couldn't stay there anymore, why I couldn't stay silent, why I couldn't keep fighting for something that stopped fighting for me. Somewhere on that dark track, in the silence between stations, I felt the first flicker of acceptance. Not peace, not yet, but acceptance. Maybe the train wouldn't arrive tonight. Maybe it would, but I wasn't the same person who boarded it, and that mattered. I rested my head against the glass again and breathed deeply, letting the rhythm of the rail steady the heaviness inside me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely lost. I just felt like someone beginning again. The night grew heavier as the train pushed forward, and something about the darkness outside made the air inside feel tighter. Not dangerous, not frightening, just tense, like the world outside was holding its breath, waiting for something. I shifted in my seat, trying to shake off the feeling, but it stayed with me like a shadow. The conductor passed by once more, moving a little faster this time. His eyes scanned the windows, then the aisles, as though he was counting the passengers silently. When he reached my row, he paused again. Not long, just enough for me to feel the air change around us. "You doing all right?" he asked, his voice firmer now. I nodded. But he didn't walk away immediately. He looked at the window beside me. The darkness outside the glass seemed deeper, as if the forest had swallowed all light. Then he said quietly, almost to himself, "The fog is thicker than expected." Fog. That word carried weight that night. I didn't understand why, but the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Not panic, just unease. Fog was normal, wasn't it? Especially on cold nights. But something about his tone felt different. He gave me a small, reassuring nod and continued down the aisle. I watched him go, then turned my eyes to the window again. At first, I thought I saw nothing but blackness, but slowly, shapes formed. Tall silhouettes of trees, faint outlines of distant hills, and a low mist that hovered close to the ground, swirling like it had a mind of its own. The train lights flickered, and for a moment everything blurred. My reflection appeared on the glass, my tired eyes, my parted lips, my breath creating a soft fog on the surface. I wasn't scared, not truly, but I wasn't calm either. Something was shifting. The woman with the child stirred as the little one whined softly in her sleep. The man with the newspaper lowered it, glancing around. The teenagers stopped whispering and looked toward the front of the train, sensing the same quiet tension that trickled through all of us. It wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, but it was there. A feeling, a waiting, a pressure holding the night still. I sat straighter and wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck. My hands felt cold, even though the air wasn't freezing. The cold was internal, the kind that comes from uncertainty. And that's when the train slowed, not a stop, just enough for everyone to notice. The wheels groaned beneath us, the carriage shook slightly, and the lights dimmed before returning to their soft yellow glow. A few passengers murmured, a child whined again, someone coughed nervously. Then came the announcement. The conductor's voice was steady, but even steadiness can carry a tremor if you listen closely. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. We will be moving slowly for a while." The passengers looked at one another. Slowly? Why? I waited, hoping he would explain more, but he didn't. The train crawled forward, and the darkness outside almost seemed to press against us. The fog thickened, now swirling higher, brushing against the windows, swallowing the landscape. For a moment, I could see nothing beyond the glass. Not trees, not hills, not sky. Just white, a heavy, rolling white. The man with the newspaper folded it quietly, his hands shaking a little. The mother kissed her child's forehead. The teenagers leaned closer to each other, whispering again, but this time their whispers had fear threaded through them. And I felt it too. Not fear of danger, fear of uncertainty. Life had taught me how to live inside uncertainty, but that didn't make it easier. I breathed slowly, letting the rhythm of the rails soothe me. But even the rails sounded different now, softer, unsure. The fog wrapped around the train like it was holding us in place. And then it happened. A sudden jolt, strong enough for me to grip the seat in front of me. The lights flickered again, longer this time. A few gasps echoed through the carriage. "What was that?" someone muttered. The train steadied again, but the jolt left an imprint in the air. A ripple of tension moving from row to row. Even I felt my heartbeat quicken. The mother whispered, "It's okay, baby," rocking her child more gently. The conductor appeared again, walking briskly, his jaw tense, his eyes sharp as he checked the windows. When he passed me, he didn't ask if I was all right this time. He just looked briefly, with something like concern. I knew enough about quiet people to understand their eyes carried more truth than their words, and his eyes were telling me something wasn't right, but still, no one panicked. We all stayed seated. We all waited. Waiting can be heavy, heavier than action, heavier than answers. The train slowed more, moving at a speed that felt almost unnatural, like it was being careful, like it was feeling its way through the night. The fog thinned for a moment, revealing tall pines beside the tracks, only for the mist to swallow them again seconds later. I pressed my fingers against the glass, feeling the coolness. The window rattled softly under my touch. My breath formed tiny clouds on the surface, disappearing as quickly as they formed. Everything about this night felt fragile. That's when an older man sitting across from me spoke. His voice was quiet but steady, like someone used to night journeys. "Fog like this can be trouble," he said, mostly to himself but loud enough for others to hear. I turned toward him. "Is it dangerous?" He shook his head slowly. "Not dangerous, just unpredictable." Unpredictable. The word lingered inside me. The man continued softly. "Trains don't stop because of fog, but they slow down for it. The driver can't see far, tracks get slippery, signals can blur." He paused, adjusting the scarf around his neck. "Sometimes it just delays everything. Delays, uncertainty, slowness. Life had been delaying me for years, so why did this feel different?" The train gave a small shudder like a sigh. Then the conductor's voice came again through the speakers. "We will continue at reduced speed. Please remain calm." Calm, calm, calm. But the repeated calmness only made people feel less calm. The fog grew thicker once more, so thick that the world outside disappeared completely. We were floating through a white void, suspended between nowhere and somewhere. And maybe that was why memories started surfacing. The ones I had tried to bury, the ones I wanted to leave behind. When life becomes a blank canvas, the mind paints its own pictures. I thought about the night I walked out of my home, the silence, the heavy air, the empty spaces. I thought about the words I didn't say, the apologies I didn't receive, the promises that weren't kept. I thought about the loneliness that had wrapped itself around me like this fog. And suddenly, this train didn't feel like a journey anymore. It felt like a mirror, reflecting the parts of my life I avoided, the parts that hurt, the parts that never healed. The train slowed again, another pause, another flicker of lights, another breath held. Someone whispered, "Are we stopping?" Someone else murmured, "I hope everything is all right." The conductor stepped into the carriage, standing at the front, holding the rail with one hand. His voice was low but firm. "We are safe. We are just taking precautions." Safe, precautions, reassurance layered with unspoken worry. He looked around the carriage, at the mother, at the elderly man, at the teenagers, at me. His gaze stayed on me a moment longer. "Everything will be okay," he said. I believed him, or I wanted to. The train eased forward again, slow and steady, pushing through the fog like a tired sailor navigating rough seas. In that moment, I realized something subtle but powerful. We were all in the same situation. Different lives, different stories, same uncertainty. And the rising tension wasn't just in the train. It was in me. It was in the way my heart beat faster, in the way my thoughts grew louder, in the way the fog outside reflected the fog inside me. This wasn't fear. This was recognition. Sometimes life slows down, not to scare you, but to force you to feel. And I was feeling everything, every disappointment, every loss, every quiet goodbye, every unanswered question. The fog, the delay, the tension, all of it became a metaphor for the journey I had been on for years. A journey without clarity, without direction, without certainty. The rising conflict wasn't about the train, it was about me. And as the train crawled forward into the thick unknown, I finally understood. Sometimes the journey becomes difficult, not because the path is blocked, but because you are being asked to slow down and face yourself. The real turning point didn't arrive with thunder. It came softly, quietly, like a whisper traveling through fog. It began with a small jolt, the train slowing again, almost to a stop, even though I thought we were finally moving steadily. The lights flickered twice, enough to make everyone lift their heads. The conductor's voice didn't come right away, and somehow that silence was heavier than any announcement he could have made. People murmured. Children shifted in their seats. A man sighed loudly. But inside me, something deeper stirred, a feeling I couldn't explain. When the conductor finally stepped into our carriage again, he was still calm, still steady, but his eyes, they held something different. Not fear, not worry, something more serious, like a quiet acceptance of things beyond his control. He stood near the center of the car and cleared his throat gently. "We'll be stopping for a little while," he said. "There's a delay ahead." A woman asked, "How long?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet." That was the first moment, the moment the outer situation and my inner world began to merge. Because the truth was, I didn't know either. Not about the train, not about myself, not about anything. Sometimes the biggest turning points are the ones we don't choose. He left the carriage and the train settled into a slow, humming stillness. The air felt different now, thicker, quiet in a way that made me listen more closely to my own heartbeat. I sat back, hands folded, eyes drifting toward the window. Outside, the fog hung in suspended layers. The rails glistened under the soft outline of distant lamps. Everything felt paused, not just the journey. The child who had tugged at my sleeve earlier was sitting quietly now, leaning against his mother, eyes half closed. His mother stroked his hair gently, her movements slow, exhausted but tender. I watched them for a long moment. There was a gentleness in that simple gesture. A memory tugged at me, one I'd tried to bury. "How strange, how life circles back," I whispered. The turning point wasn't dramatic, but it held weight. Because I realized something I had ignored for years. I wasn't just uneasy because of the fog or the delay or the conductor's warnings. I was uneasy because I was on this journey for a reason I hadn't admitted to myself. I was traveling toward someone, or away from someone, perhaps both. The truth lodged itself in my chest. I had been running from a part of my life I never fully faced. And now, sitting there in the half-lit carriage with the world outside gray and silent, I could no longer avoid it. The train wasn't moving. Neither was I. Not truly. The stillness made me think. The delay forced me to see. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the memories come. Slow, painful, but real. Voices, faces, words I wished I had spoken, words I wished I hadn't. The train hummed gently beneath me, like a heartbeat that did not belong to me, but still held me steady. And then the conductor returned.
His steps were slower this time, measured, quiet, as if he understood that every sound mattered in a moment like this. He stood beside my seat and spoke softly. "Are you all right?" His voice was gentle, kind, human. I didn't answer right away because for the first time that entire night, I didn't know the answer. He waited. I looked up at him and nodded, but my voice trembled when I said, "Yes, yes, I think so." It wasn't the truth, but it was the beginning of one. He gave a small smile, the kind that holds more empathy than conversation, and said, "We may not arrive tonight, but we will get there. Don't worry." Those words echoed deeper than he intended. Not just about the train, not just about the journey. They echoed into the quiet, hidden corners of my heart. We may not arrive tonight. Sometimes healing takes longer than we expect. Sometimes forgiveness arrives later than we want. Sometimes truth comes slowly, delayed, like a train caught in fog. His words became the turning point. Not the delay, not the darkness, not the fog. His kindness. A stranger reminding me that the journey is still unfolding, even when it feels paused, even when we feel lost. The light steadied. The fog shifted slightly outside. The train breathed again beneath us. And inside me, something softened. For the first time in a long time, I let myself hope. The fog outside began to thin, but inside me, something deeper was clearing. The train remained still, humming on the cold track, but my mind, my heart, they were moving in a direction I had avoided for far too long. It felt like the night itself had paused just to give me space to breathe, to think, to finally feel. The world around me softened. Children slept. Adults muttered quietly. Someone coughed. Someone else sighed. Life continued in small ways, in small sounds. But inside me, a realization was forming, slow, steady, unavoidable. I had spent so much of my life surviving, pushing through days that blended together, hiding pain so deeply that even I forgot it was still there. I sat there thinking about the years that slipped by without me noticing their weight until moments like these forced me to stop. The conductor's gentle words still echoed. "We may not arrive tonight, but we will get there." I held on to them like a fragile piece of hope. As the minutes turned into an hour, the quietness gave me time to face something I had been avoiding, something personal, something emotional, something that had shaped every step of my journey. I wasn't just traveling to another city, I was traveling toward a truth I could no longer run from, a relationship broken, a memory unspoken, a goodbye that had never been properly said. And somewhere in the mix of fog and stillness, I realized something important. I wasn't only afraid of what waited at the end of the line. I was afraid of myself, afraid of the emotions I had buried, afraid of the pain I pretended didn't exist, afraid of facing the parts of my heart that hurt when no one was watching. The train, the darkness, the delay, they were all mirrors reflecting a truth I had forgotten. Healing doesn't rush. Healing doesn't obey timetables. Healing doesn't follow schedules. Just like the fog outside, it takes its time. I leaned back and let myself breathe into that thought. Across the aisle, an older man closed his newspaper and rubbed his eyes. He looked tired but peaceful, like someone who had accepted the unpredictability of life. He caught my gaze for a brief moment and nodded, as if saying, "It's okay, just wait. The journey will continue." In that small gesture, I felt something shift again. Strangers can hold pieces of our journey without even knowing it. I turned my attention back to the window. The fog moved like waves, rolling, dissolving, returning, almost like emotions do. And slowly, the truth I had been resisting rose inside me. I was on my way to meet someone I had not seen in years, someone who had once been the center of my world, someone whose absence shaped more of my life than their presence ever did. I had prepared excuses for myself. I'm busy. It's complicated. Maybe later. Not now. But deep down, the real reason was simpler and harder to admit. I was afraid. Afraid of what I might feel. Afraid of what they might say. Afraid of the truth that waited between us. A truth too heavy to carry, too painful to drop. The train delay, the fog, the darkness, it all felt symbolic. Maybe the universe was giving me time, not to arrive later, but to understand sooner, to understand myself, my fears, my regrets, my longing. I closed my eyes and let the memories come, unfiltered, unedited, unrestrained. There was a time when I laughed easily, a time when life felt warm, a time when I didn't carry the silent weight that pressed on my chest now. But life changes. People grow apart. Words go unsaid. Moments slip away. And then one day, you look around and realize how much you've lost, not in one moment, but in many small ones. I opened my eyes again when I felt a gentle shift beneath my feet. The train moved slightly, a pulse, not a departure, just enough to remind us it was alive. A few passengers stirred. The child who had fallen asleep earlier woke up and looked around, eyes wide. His mother whispered something to him and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. The tenderness of it hit me more deeply than I expected. Love, even in small gestures, changes everything. A warm feeling spread through me. Not joy, not sadness. Something in between. A quiet acceptance. I had spent so much time focusing on what went wrong, on what I lost, on how things fell apart, that I forgot something important. Life continues. Love lingers. Hope returns. Even through fog, even through delays, even through long nights. The conductor stepped into the carriage again. His face was calmer now, his shoulders less heavy. He spoke softly, with a reassuring tone. We're waiting for the track to clear. It won't be long now. People murmured. Some sounded relieved. Some didn't react at all. But I felt something else, a subtle lift inside me. Not because the train would move soon, but because I would, emotionally, spiritually, gently. The journey had already changed me. For a long moment, I watched him speaking to people, answering questions, calming worries. There was something so profoundly human about the way he carried himself, measured, kind, steady. And it reminded me that life isn't only about destinations, it's about the people who walk or ride beside us. Even strangers matter in our story. When he passed by my seat again, I said quietly, "Thank you." He gave the same small smile as before, warm, grounding, and nodded, "You'll be okay." The simplicity of those words reached me in a place I hadn't accessed in years. I didn't cry, but something inside me softened further. For the first time since I boarded the train, I believed him. The lights brightened slightly. The fog began to lift more. The hum of the train grew deeper. We were getting ready, not only for physical movement, but for emotional one. I felt it. Other passengers felt it. The whole carriage felt it. I straightened in my seat, not with tension, but with calm readiness. I wasn't the same person who stepped onto this train hours ago. I was quieter, softer, more aware. I no longer felt lost, just delayed. And delays don't mean endings. Sometimes they mean preparation. The stillness that once felt heavy now felt peaceful. The darkness outside no longer scared me. It simply held the night, nothing more. And the journey? The journey was still ahead. We weren't moving yet, but I was. Inside, accepting, releasing, preparing, healing in slow motion. And I understood now. Sometimes the longest delays lead to the deepest understanding. Sometimes the fog forces us to see what we couldn't before. Sometimes the night teaches us what the day never could. The train wasn't the only thing waiting for the path to clear. I was too. And finally, gently, quietly, I felt ready for whatever came next. The first sign of movement was so subtle I almost didn't notice it. A soft vibration, a gentle rhythm returning under my feet, a quiet shift in the air as if the night itself inhaled and exhaled. The train stirred. People lifted their heads. Someone whispered, "I think we're moving." But before the wheels turned, I made a different decision, a quieter one, a personal one. I decided I would face whatever waited for me, not with fear, not with regret, but with acceptance. Maybe that was the real journey all along. Outside, the fog thinned even more, not gone completely, but lighter, less heavy, less suffocating. I stared through the glass as the world reshaped itself into faint outlines and shadows. For the first time in hours, I could see the rails stretching forward, disappearing into the distance. A path, not entirely clear, but visible enough. Life often feels that way. We never see everything, just enough for the next step. The conductor came through the carriage one last time, making sure everyone was settled. He walked slowly, scanning the faces he had reassured, guided, comforted during the long night. When he reached my seat, he paused again. "Looks like we're about to go," he said softly. "Yes," I breathed. There was something different in my voice now, steadier, warmer, more certain. He studied me for a brief moment and nodded, as if he noticed the change too. The quiet transformation, the shift in my energy. "Take care of yourself," he said. It was simple but meaningful. Then he moved on, stepping into the next carriage, leaving behind a calm presence that lingered like a soft echo. The lights brightened fully, the engine hummed, and the night loosened its grip. And finally, the train began to move. Slowly at first, a careful glide, a gentle roll. The wheels pressed into the track, pushing us forward, steady and sure. The motion felt grounding, not rushed, not restless, just determined. A few passengers clapped softly, not in celebration, but in relief. Children woke and blinked into the new brightness. Mothers wrapped blankets closer around sleepy shoulders. A couple leaned their heads together. Life resumed. As the train picked up pace, I felt a curious blend of heaviness and lightness in my chest. The heaviness from what I still had to face, the lightness from knowing I could. I leaned back and let the rhythm of the tracks whisper beneath me, clack, 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 like a heartbeat aligning with the moment. I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever waited for me at the end of the line, I would meet it with strength. Not loud strength, not the kind that shouts or demands attention, but quiet strength. The kind that grows in stillness, the kind that forms in nights like this. The kind that emerges when you are forced to stop and see yourself clearly. The train moved faster now, fog streaked past the windows, lights blurred into soft lines. I closed my eyes briefly and whispered something to the night. Thank you. Thank you to the delay. Thank you to the fog. Thank you to the conductor. Thank you to the silence. Thank you to the unexpected pause that changed my understanding. Sometimes life slows us down not to punish us, but to prepare us. And I was prepared now. Prepared to speak the words I had held inside, prepared to face the person I had been avoiding, prepared to step into the truth I ran from, prepared to arrive. The journey felt different now, lighter, clearer, quieter. I could feel it not just in the train, but in myself. A woman across the aisle smiled at me. I returned the smile, small but sincere. Human connection, even brief, even simple, softens the hardest parts of our stories. The train pressed forward through the last stretch of fog, and eventually the gray outside dissolved into soft shapes of early morning darkness. Not bright yet, not daylight, but a gentler darkness, the kind that hints at the coming dawn. I breathed deeply and let the air settle inside me.
Forgiveness, whether given or received, takes time. Healing takes courage. Understanding takes patience. I didn't rush any of it. The train continued, steady and certain. Minutes passed, then more. The world outside cleared little by little, and just when I least expected it, the conductor's voice came through the speaker once again, calm, warm, reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will arrive shortly." The words settled gently inside me. We will arrive, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, humanly. No matter how delayed a journey becomes, no matter how foggy the path is, no matter how unclear the direction feels, eventually we arrive. Maybe changed, maybe softer, maybe wiser, maybe more understanding. But we arrive. The child in the corner rubbed his eyes and yawned. His mother smiled. A man folded his jacket. A woman fixed her hair. Everyone prepared in their own small ways for what waited outside the train. I prepared too. The station lights appeared in the distance, soft halos in the fog. The train slowed gently, gracefully, without sudden stops. I could feel the subtle shift in motion, the easing of speed, the calm descent into arrival. The fog lifted completely, and the tracks ahead were clear. The conductor passed through the carriage one final time, his posture relaxed now, his voice steady, his duty almost complete. When he reached me, he gave a last nod. "You made it," he said. "Thank you," I replied, and I meant it, not just for the journey, but for everything. He stepped aside as the train made its final stop, brakes sighing softly, doors unlocking with a familiar click. People stood, bags lifted, coats straightened. I rose too, not with hesitation, with readiness. The doors opened, cool morning air swept in, fresh, new, inviting. The night was behind me, the journey was behind me, the delay was behind me. And the moment I stepped onto the platform, I felt something deep in my chest loosen completely, a knot untying, a weight releasing. I had arrived, not just at a station, not just at a destination. I had arrived in myself, with acceptance, with clarity, with hope. The fog had taught me what rushing never could. I looked around the station as people scattered, each moving toward their own stories, their own truths, their own endings and beginnings. And I walked forward too. My steps were steady, my breath was calm, my heart was open. Sometimes life delays us so we can catch up with ourselves. And finally, after a long journey, a long night, and a long silence, I was ready.